Have you ever had good intentions, but things got all messed up? Gotten into a difficult situation and attempted to do everything in your power to get out of it? We're going to look at the possibilities of what you could or should do. This is part of my life series where I parallel things in the vineyard, winery, and things related to wine with different aspects of life. In this episode, we'll look at the correlation between the vineyard and how to embrace the richness of life's difficult times. Tennessee and Terroir holds an important parallel for our lives. It has some very powerful insights, particularly in today's environment. If this somehow resonates with you, I'd appreciate letting me know in the comments below, and subscribe. The subscription is actually free. Also, ring the little bell, and best of all, if it was helpful, share this with a friend. Some friends of mine were in the process of moving, and we're giving away furniture, paintings, clothes, all sorts of home and kitchen paraphernalia. They were downsizing from a large home in the suburbs to a smaller condo downtown, and invited friends and family over just to take whatever they wanted. His brother, Tom, had come up from Tennessee to help with the move and take a trailer load of stuff back with him. During the course of the day, Tom found out that I was involved with wine. As we were taking a break, Tom talked about his small vineyard in Tennessee. He indicated he had 3 or 4 years of growing grapes, and he began to make wine. He's been making wine for several years and admitted, it's really not that good. He was hoping I could have some suggestions for him. I said it was virtually impossible to know without paying him a visit and making an assessment of the vineyard, his vineyard techniques, the production and aging process, and his overall operation. But I said, Tom, I can tell you up front, when you boil it down, it really is pretty simple. There are 3 basic reasons why you're not producing good wine: the terroir, the enologist, or both. Tom laughed and said, "What the heck did you just say?" And I said, well, the enologist is the winemaker. The terroir is, among other things, the vineyard environment, which primarily includes the climate, weather, soil, topography, or the layout of the land, and among other things, the sun hours that the land gets. All this has an impact on how well the vines grow, how the grapes develop, and which grapes are best suited for that particular vineyard, his vineyard. Tom indicated that he was doing a lot of reading from the pros and from the University of California in Davis. He was learning how to make wine from some of the top experts in the world and was following their process very closely. It sounded like he was doing all the right stuff. I affirmed what he was doing, his studying the elements in making wine, and encouraged him by citing an example of 2 totally inexperienced winemakers in eastern Washington and northeastern Oregon that bought some land, planted some vines, and 5 years later, after a ton of research and hard work, from their very first harvest, they had made a 100-point world-class Syrah and a 90-point red blend. These guys were a couple of mathematicians and techno geeks and told everybody that would listen to them that they made their wine by the numbers. They made their wine by the book. I said to Tom, if you're as diligent as these guys were, and as you say you are, yet the wine is still not very good, then the likelihood is that your problem may be in the vineyard. His problem may not be making the wine, but in growing the grapes. Either what you're doing in the vineyard or the vineyard itself. Now, I asked Tom a bunch of questions. No pun intended. You get it, bunch in wine, which revolved around the terroir and what he was doing in the vineyard. The upshot was I asked Tom to tell me all about his property, its key topographical features, and where he had had the vines planted. He was meticulous in the property description. You could tell this guy absolutely loved his land. Dang, I started thinking, well, maybe I don't need to go pay him a visit after all. Well, anyhow, he went on to say he had selected the best and most fertile, richest plot of land on the valley floor. It's surrounded by trees to minimize the amount of wind on the vines. He underscored that the vines are doing extremely well. They were growing like crazy, and he had more grapes than he knew what to do with. Now, after listening to Tom's explanation, I told him that most grapes don't like wet feet, which means they don't like to get too much water. The valley floor in that particular location may be permitting the vines to get too much water, which is not good for the vines. Also, the trees surrounding his vines to protect him may be causing some problems. His vines may need a better or the correct exposure to the sun. They were doing too well. He needed to reduce their vigor just a little bit. Because the ground was so fertile, his vines were growing too many cordons or branches and producing too many bunches of grapes. He needed to force the vine's energy into fewer grapes. That would create a more flavorful grape and greater character. Now, in all likelihood, the best thing for him to do was to either aggressively prune and reduce the number of cordons or cull the grapes and reduce the number of grape bunches. This is a very labor-intensive process, or actually another option was he could dig up the vines and plant them someplace else. You know, I told him my hunch without taking soil samples is to consider transplanting the vines into that rocky, well-drained soil that he had talked about a little bit earlier. That spot on the southwest-facing hill above the valley floor. Tom, your land is too fertile, plus your vines are not getting enough correct sun exposure. The roots of your vines need to struggle to get to the deep water. You're making it way too easy for the vines to grow. You got too many grapes holding too much water, and you're ending up with flabby wine. Now, I went on to say, Tom, the greater the struggle, the greater the character of your wine. The thing you need to keep in mind is, if planted in the right spot, the vines will struggle, but the fruit will be great. But if not planted in the right spot, you need to be vigilant in tending your vines every single day and in the right way. That's if you want to have a chance of having really good fruit. Either way, Tom had to do a lot of work. So the question comes up, does wine taste like the soil it comes from? It's very common to believe that if a vine is grown in a certain soil type, then it will take on the flavors and certain textures associated with that soil. This is not impossible, but it's really unlikely because of the way vines work. When vines take up nutrients from the soil, they only take up what they need and no more. That means if a vine is planted in slate soil, it will take up the same amount of types of nutrients as the vine if it were grown in any other soil or any other soil type. So the mineral components of the soil does not come out in the flavor of the wine. Busted. But this is a very common myth, even among wine professionals. However, there is definitely a link. The link is the terroir. Now, terroir is the complete natural environment in which a particular vine is grown. So, a Chardonnay from Sonoma will taste different than a Chardonnay from Chablis, France, because of the terroir, not just the soil. How are you doing there? Is this information helpful? Is it making sense? If it is, write Asti in the comments below. Now, speaking of terroir, that brings us to the second myth. Terroir matters more than anything else. Again, terroir has to do with the climate plus the weather, soil, terrain, and all the stuff in the natural environment that the grape or the grapevine grows in. This is the age-old question or debate, nature versus nurture. Some will say that terroir, nature, is the most important thing, while others will say that nurture, which is the enologist or the winemaker, is the most important thing. Some will even ask the question, which would you rather drink? A wine made by a great producer and a seasoned enologist from a lesser known region of the world, or a wine from a world-renowned region made by an unknown producer and an untested winemaker? Typically, most experts will follow the winemaker. Personally, I sort of blend the two, nature and nurture, leaning a little bit more towards the nurturing side or the winemaker. Terroir obviously matters, but I love the way winemakers, whether relatively new at it or a seasoned enologist, puts their personality, their fingerprint on the wine. They work their magic with grapes that they're given and they're given to work with. The winemaker is the key to the finished product, which is in our glass. Terroir, the most important thing? Wrong. Busted. Well, there you have it. We just busted 2 wine myths. If you want to be an Asti Wine Consultant Mythbuster, then check out my playlist. We have over a dozen episodes to choose from. To be certified as an Asti Wine Consultant's official wine Mythbuster, let me know by clicking in the link in the description. You know, I understand Tom invested the time, energy, and expenses in transferring many of his vines to that better place. Oh, and it seemed to be working out for him. Much better wine. Well, there you have it. Tom, Tennessee, and terroir. The greater the struggle, the greater the character. Hey Posse, thanks so much for investing the time to watch this video. I trust it was helpful to you. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. And please consider hitting subscribe. Also, click here to check out our new online shop. We have a great lineup of wine-related items that will help you get the most out of your wine experience. Oh, and be sure to check out these other videos. Until next time, cheers.